The fantasy football playoffs are coming quick. Here are all the players you need to add to guarantee yourself an undefeated stretch all the way till that fact to get you in there or get you out of the toilet bowl, whatever you're dealing with. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video if you are looking for some quick waiver wire defenses we can't stream to dominate, because I will go over those in the end of the video as well. And hit that like button. If you do like waiver wire videos, I will continue to do them for the rest of the season. But the number one ad, I'm not going to waste time, is going to be Quentin Johnson. He gets my number one priority this week because the Chargers offense has completely turned itself around from the beginning of the year. Through their first 4 weeks of the season, they were dead last in passing attempts at 22 per game. Well, ever since their bye week in week 4, they came back 31 passing attempts on average since then. Now, that might not seem like a huge number, that's that big of a difference, but it is, especially when you're considering wide receiver upside. That's 9 more passing attempts, 9 more targets that go to somebody. And if you look at Quentin Johnson, he's had 10 or more fantasy points in all 3 of his healthy games since the bye week, and a career high in snaps and a great route participation last week specifically. He had 8 targets against the Bengals last week where he only caught 2 balls, which isn't the best, but still, that 8 targets finished with 12.8 fantasy points and a 22% team target share. I had him as a sleeper in the must-start video last week. It turned out to pay off for us. We're going to continue to start him here because he gets a really good matchup against the Ravens this week. We all know how good that is. They're number 1 in points allowed to wide receivers this year. We got to be following the trends with that. But he also follows that with the Falcons, which is a very positive matchup. Again, top 5 in fantasy points allowed to the receivers. The Chiefs, very negative, but then the Buccaneers again. So 2 out of his 3 next matchups are very positive in fantasy points allowed. So he has one of the easiest rest of season schedules as well. We want to be stashing him while we can. But another guy we can be stashing, a wide receiver here, Elijah Moore. Because we've seen this trend with Jameis Winston year after year. The pass volume is insane. Will he be super accurate and pinpoint every time? No, but when the sheer passing volume with Jameis Winston is as high as it is right now and has really been for his entire career, it doesn't matter. Since Winston took that place of Deshaun Watson, he's been able to give Elijah Moore a 23% team target share on average in that stretch. Now, 23%, again, might not be crazy, especially when you see guys like CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown at almost 30% of the target share. But you got to consider, he's averaging, 44 passing attempts a game? So 23% of 44 is 10.2, I believe, 10 point something. It's definitely 10 targets a game. I know that math. He also finished last week with 1.49 yards per route run. That is a very positive number, especially when you're playing out of the slot like he does. We know those guys already get an increased number of targets, but now he gets raw looks already. Looking ahead to his matchups, he gets a middle of the pack one here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Following that with the Broncos, and then following that again with the Steelers. It's not the most positive matchups for his next 3 or even the rest of the season. But again, when that pass volume is averaging 45 a game, it really doesn't matter what the offense is going to look like. If it's interceptions, if it's incompletions, the pass volume is going to be there, so his upside will continue to follow that. But we do have to talk about Cam Akers here. If we look at his splits from last week, we see Cam Akers finished with 11.6 fantasy points compared to Aaron Jones at 5.3. That's a big difference. Let's break it down with the numbers that actually matter and show what happened here. Aaron Jones, he did lead the backfield in snaps, 39% compared to Cam Akers at 27. Now we look at the carries, 15 for Aaron Jones, 10 for Cam Akers, 14 routes run out of the backfield for Jones, 13 for Cam Akers. That is a very close split. And ever since the Vikings brought him onto this team, he's been increasing his snap share. He started out at 22%. Now he's all the way up in the 30s essentially. For now, we do still have to treat him as a handcuff backup running back. Aaron Jones is definitely going to be that number 1 guy. But he is, number 1, a high-level handcuff, and Aaron Jones does have a little bit of injury history. So if that were to ever continue and pop back up this season, Cam Akers would be in his spot and be very efficient in that. The team is 11th in rushing attempts, 15th in passing yards. They have some playmakers on the team, which is going to keep this offense rolling and moving. They don't utilize their running backs in the red zone a ton, which does kind of give a little bit of a downside. But in the 2-minute drill and the 3rd down drill, it's not necessarily 100% dominated by Aaron Jones anymore. Cam Akers is getting his role in that. But another handcuff running back I do want to highlight outside of your top guys like Tyler Algier or Braylon Allen, it's going to be Roschon Johnson. If we look at his usage split from last week specifically in a terrible loss to the Packers, I don't know if you're a Bears fan out there, but if you are, I'm sorry for you. He's off 42% of the snaps compared to DeAndre Swift at 57%. That's a little bit close, but you also look at the numbers here. 14 routes run out of the backfield compared to DeAndre Swift at 19. So very similar receiving upside as well, and that's been the one separator for DeAndre Swift for his entire career, that he is a very good receiving running back. And he's tying Roschon Johnson essentially in that. He had 10 carries compared to Swift at 14 and a touchdown for each of them. So let's look at where exactly the field time differentiates so we can see if Roschon Johnson is even worth adding in the first place. DeAndre Swift dominated the early down snaps, 37 compared to Roschon at 9. That's not anything out of the ordinary. But then you look at the goal line. They both had 2 snaps in that role. Roschon Johnson had 6 out of the 7 short yardage snaps. So 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 2nd and 1, stuff like that. And then 7 out of the 9 third down plays. All 2-minute drill snaps, all 6 of them. So a lot of the important snaps are going to Roschon Johnson. Yes, the early down snaps are important, but they're nothing like these 2-minute drills, the passing down snaps, all of the things that are important to get first downs and really block in this offense and what he's really good at. So the fact that the goal line role is already split and a majority of the passing down work is split the first game with the new offensive coordinator, it's a really good sign for him. Now, if Caleb Williams can continue to be decent at the very least, he will have some upside. Now, he's not going to have standalone upside as far as start him with DeAndre Swift, but again, if DeAndre Swift does get injured, he's a top-tier guy, and he already has proven a little bit of value outside of that. If you're in a deeper league, maybe you can consider it. But if you're looking for a tight end here, a guy that honestly needs to be rostered in 100% of leagues, I don't care what size it's in, is going to be Hunter Henry. With Drake May in this offense, his targets have almost doubled, which is absolutely insane to say. If you look inside the statistics, which I have, with Drake May, he is a top 5 tight end in target share, routes run per game, and just outside of that in receiving yards as well. With the tight end pool looking very, very lackluster this year, like it does almost every year, you have to be getting the more predictable guys, which looks like Hunter Henry this year. He only had 1 game under 6 targets since May has become the starter, and he is a very favorable rest of season schedule for the tight end position with the Dolphins, the Colts, and the Cardinals in his next 3 games. That is absolutely positive and should be relatively easy for Drake May to generate some offense. But if you need a quarterback, Bo Nix is going to be my number 1 option here. Somehow, some way, this man is the QB7 on the year in front of guys like Mahomes, in front of guys like CJ Stroud, and he just put up 28.8 fantasy points against the Falcons last night. If we look at the statistics, he really is insane. He's the QB9 in air yards per game, the QB10 in passing attempts, and the QB20 in passing yards. So their average numbers, they're upside numbers, but they're not necessarily QB1 numbers. But if we look at his rushing upside, that's what makes him separated from the rest of these guys. He's a top 5 quarterback in total rushing touchdowns on the year. He carries inside the 5 and total rushing attempts per game. The same kind of statistics that has been keeping Jaden Daniels as a top guy before his rib injury. All of this is great. He has the 8th easiest schedule for rest of season for quarterbacks as far as fantasy points go to that position. Getting the Raiders this week, a very positive matchup. We should be starting him in. Followed with the Browns, a bye week, the Colts, Chargers, and Bengals to finish out the season. If your trade deadline hasn't happened yet, trade your Patrick Mahomes, trade your Brock Purdy, trade your Joe Burrow for a startable piece, and then start Bo Nix for the rest of the season. That's how you get value. He's also the QB4 in deep ball attempts per game, which allows a lot more upside compared to a guy like Drake May, who keeps everything short and close to the line of scrimmage, who doesn't have a ton of huge upside as far as passing yards go. The team is top 10 in passing attempts. The volume is there. The fantasy points are obviously there. He gets a really good matchup against the Raiders this week. But if you can't get him, Matthew Stafford is going to be your second best option here. All of his weapons are back and healthy into this offense, which drastically changes and increases his pass volume. But number 2, his fantasy points per pass attempt value, which is also important. The team is 9th in passing attempts, but top 5 if you isolate all the healthy games that Puka and Kupp have been in this offense for. But what makes him really special is that he is the QB5 in pass attempts inside the 10-yard line and the QB7 in air yards per game. When you have those numbers and that consistency inside the red zone, it's exactly what you need for a quarterback that relies 110% on his upside from the pass game, because he has negative rushing upside and no rushing floor at all. A fun fact, he's actually averaging -1 rushing yards per game, so that should just show you he's not going to get you any upside on that fact. He does get a tougher matchup against the Eagles this week. They've been really, really good as of late, but he is looking to finish the season strong, and that's not new. Last year he did the same thing. From week 12 and on, he was the quarterback 10. The coaching staff hasn't changed. The players really haven't changed. We could see maybe this is a trend that Matthew Stafford pops off in the second half of the year. But as for some defenses we can go through and stream, I love this part of the video. The number 1 option is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason they're on here is because they really have not been good as far as fantasy points for the past few weeks. I guarantee you they were probably dropped in a majority of your leagues. Since week 9, they're averaging 2.5 fantasy points a game. Everybody is going to be dropping them here. But now they get a dream matchup against the Panthers, who have looked a little bit better, all things considered, with Bryce Young back in this offense, but still a top 5 matchup in points allowed to opposing defenses. And the Chiefs are allowing bottom 3 fantasy points to wide receivers, quarterbacks, and running backs. I mean, I have them projected for more than 9 fantasy points in this matchup. They are very solid. It just hasn't necessarily translated to fantasy points over the past few weeks. But we can also go through and grab the Buccaneers. It's not a very pretty defense. I'm not going to lie to you. They're averaging 6 fantasy points a game on the year, but they have had a very tough schedule so far this year. Now they get really good matchups here against the Giants this week, who may or may not be without Daniel Jones. That's probably a positive as well, followed by the Panthers and the Raiders in their next 2. You can stash them for the next few weeks as well. Just be aware they are a bit more risky from how the defense has been playing, but Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded head coach, so there's always that upside. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you in the waiver wire trap video coming tomorrow. You do not want to miss that. All glory to the man above.